evening. I'm Charles Duffy, and this is Political Pulse. Tonight we're going to take on blogging and politics, and we have on political blogging extraordinaire Adam Pagnucco. Thank you for joining us again, Adam. And you have the blog Maryland Politics Watch. Many people are logging on to your blog each day. I guess it's www.maryland-politics.blogspot.com. I'm a regular. I regularly read it. Very good blog. But Adam, how does I'm afraid that newspapers are going to go out of business because people are logging on to the blogs and getting their news that way.
I sure hope they don't, because I depend on the reporting of the Post and the Gazette and the Sun and other newspapers for good content. But if they do have financial challenges, maybe that's partly due to the fact that they give their own content away.
And but newspapers, and when I was a youngster, I read 3 or 4 newspapers a day. Today, kids are getting their news on the internet. A lot of families don't even get the newspaper delivered to their house. But newspaper reporting is straight down the middle generally. Don't have a slant or anything like that. But blogging is different. I mean, your blog, you seem to not like hypocrisy. You point out hypocrisy, sometimes both sides. But even you, Adam, and most bloggers have a slant.
Yeah, absolutely. And blogging, the way I do it, the way that most people do it, is not journalism. There's still a place for objective, paid journalism where people are trying to tell it like it is without an agenda. And that's why I think it would be a very bad thing if institutions like the Post and the Gazette and the Sun went downhill and all it was left is blogs. It's not sustainable. We need those institutions, and we want them to do well.
But you say there's a place for journalism, but when are people going to figure that out? I mean, it might be that the only paper left standing might be the New York Times, and it'll cost $2 a day to get a newspaper. Is that where we're headed?
I don't know. You have to ask those corporations, because they're making business decisions right now to survive. And in terms of local coverage, it looks like what they're doing is trying to cut their way to profitability. And that's a strategy that has a lot of problems. If you do that, you're cutting your quality. People are going to see it. You're going to damage your brand name over time. If I were them, there's no need for them to be in these big fancy office buildings in downtown D.C. and to have all this overhead. Why not have the reporters operate out of their cars with laptops and cell phones and cut out all that other stuff? Instead, they're cutting the reporters.
Well, let's talk about what you do, and you cover state of Maryland politics, Montgomery County politics. You put out a blog entry many times, once a day. Very good entries, very well researched. But recently, I think in April, you had a story about, it was titled "Unveiled: The Senators Who Blocked a Credit Card Bill." And I guess Bill Frick, a delegate from Montgomery County, had a bill trying to stop deceptive credit card practices in the House of Delegates. It passed 136-1 in the House of Delegates. But in the Senate Finance Committee, you pointed out that or actually 2 state senators, one from Montgomery County, Rob Garagiola, basically killed the bill in committee. And you had the Senate Finance Committee sheet original, where I guess Senator Garagiola and another senator, I think her name was Kelly from Baltimore City, killed the bill. And you basically said, you printed this story, and you said, how could this be? Why did they kill this? And then at the end you said, hey, if the state senators want to address this, they could. But how did you get that story? Did the state delegate or the interested in that say, hey, there's an unfairness here, Adam. You need to print this. And let's go from there.
I was communicating with people that were in favor of the bill, and they got the sheet. And committee sheets, they're not on the internet. You actually have to go to Annapolis and grab them. There's a little bit of sensitivity when you look at what goes on in these committees. They really don't want that to be out there. And there's also kind of an informal rule that if you're lobbying for a bill and you go into the committee and it's deliberating and voting on that bill, they don't want you in there. It's kind of an unwritten rule that's gone on for a long, long time. So this is going to be the next wave of evaluating candidates next year. There's going to be more attention paid to their committee votes because we've been doing it on the blog.
But there's no way, I never see this in a newspaper where a newspaper says, hey, look at this committee vote, look at this document, and calls out a state senator saying, how did this happen? Usually, like you said, these are done behind the curtain. And but that's a difference between a newspaper and a blog.
They should be doing that. And in the old days, they did do that. And I don't know why they don't now, because this is good stuff. And, you know, the day later, or maybe even the same day, Senator Garagiola came on and responded to it under his own name and told his side of the story.
On the blog.
On the blog. And good for him.
By printing the one side first, the House of Delegates and the deceptive practices with the credit card bill, were you just putting it out there, or were you taking a position saying, hey, this was obviously a good bill. Everybody's against deceptive credit card practices. Was that a slant, or were you just throwing it out there?
I like that bill. And I think that, you know, particularly now when the credit cards companies have been running amok, when the Congress just passed legislation to crack down on them, we were about to do the same thing in Maryland. It dies suddenly. I think that's an issue that sees the light of day. Now, it may not have been handled in that particular way by a professional and objective journalist, but it might have been handled like by a columnist for a newspaper. There's a role for them too. And I think that what we do in the blogs is more similar to what the columnists do than what the reporters do.
Right, and at the end of the first blog entry about the bill and what happened, the 136-1 vote in the House of Delegates, you said, if any of the senators who voted against the bill would like to comment, please do so. And it was interesting, as you said, that Senator Garagiola got on and he gave his side of the story and said basically that the bill was poorly drafted. But I thought it was interesting that he felt the need to go on and give the other side of the story, which kind of leads me to believe that, you know, blogs are, you know, people are looking at blogs. Elected people know that. They feel the need to be on there and tell their side of things.
They read it. They know that other elected officials read it. They know that lots of people read it. I've put up blog entries about the traffic that Maryland blogs have had over the last year. Our own traffic was up almost 6 times since the fall of 2007. They pay attention to that. And, you know, some of the elected officials wish they had more coverage from the mainstream media, but they don't.
But you said you were somewhat in favor of that particular bill, but then Senator Garagiola gave his side of it, said it was poorly drafted, but you just kind of let it hang. You didn't address his point of view.
He's a senator. I'm not. I let him have the final word.
Okay. Let's move on. Blair Lee. He writes for the Gazette, columnist, has a long past here in Montgomery County politics. His dad was the acting governor at one point in time of Maryland, but he's given you some kudos in his column. He says, you know, basically they're well researched, and I'm sure he doesn't always agree with your viewpoint. You're more, I'd say, on the liberal progressive side. Blair Lee's probably moderate with a lot of things, but is there kind of and you often, or sometimes you print his columns. I know that recently he did a column that I thought was good on you know, William Donald Schaefer in a nursing home. There was a film about William Donald Schaefer, and William Donald Schaefer was tough on Blair Lee historically, but Blair Lee wrote a kind of a touching column on the nursing home and William Donald Schaefer aging. But you printed that column, and is there kind of like a mutual respect here between you and Blair Lee?
You know, Blair Lee's been doing this longer than anybody else. There are things that I would have to research for hours and hours and hours that he already has in his head. His experience is just unparalleled among people that cover Maryland politics. So yeah, whether you agree with him or not, people pay attention to him. You know?
But it's interesting. Are people getting news from the Gazette and Blair Lee's column, or are they getting news also from Maryland Politics Watch blog? I mean,
I think they should get news from a variety of sources, and I think that's what's happening for people my age and younger. They read the Post and the Sun and the Gazette and Blair Lee and the blogs and anything else they can get their hands on. And good for them, because these sources of information are going to conflict, and they should take the information and make up their own minds.
Mm-hmm. And Blair Lee writes a lot of columns on our Montgomery County delegates going down to Annapolis and basically not standing together and getting taken advantage of, and not doing a good job down in Annapolis. But do you share his view at all on that point?
We have a good delegation when you look at the individual members. They do not behave in the same way as a group that the delegations from Baltimore City and Prince George's County do. When those delegations are looking for a parochial concern, they come together and they pressure en masse. The Prince George's delegates did this a couple of months ago during the most recent session. and urging there to be changes in the state aid formula to benefit them. Now, they didn't get them, but they put up quite a stink, and they're going to get something out of it.
Well, that begs the question, why don't the Montgomery County delegates stand together like the Baltimore City or the Prince George's delegates?
They're a very large group. They're a very diverse group. They did stand together against teacher pensions. The governor did not propose sending them down here. If they had, I think most of our guys would have fought against them. But, you know, being so large and diverse a group, and you know that delegates representing a place like Potomac and a place like Tacoma Park are going to have different priorities, it can be challenging to coordinate them. But, you know, there are some good people there, and they need to get some seniority and wield some authority, and maybe we need to grow our own Mike Miller in this county to, you know, whip
Adam,
some discipline.
are you protecting the delegates who read your blog here?
I don't know. Do any of them read it?
Well, I would say so. There was an interesting blog entry that you had recently. State Board of Education and local caps. There are no ground for waivers. I guess Montgomery County wanted a cap or wanted a waiver for basically, what is it, having to maintain a per pupil spending amount. Basically, Montgomery County wanted to save $79 million, it looks like, through this waiver, and the state said, no, you can't have this waiver, and you wrote about that.
Yeah, people inside the county are up in arms about this. The press release that the county put out when they were denied the waiver was this sizzling piece of work. It said this is second guessing by bureaucrats in Annapolis. But when you really read that decision, they said, hey, you know, we are not going to respect you guys making an argument that tax caps like the Ficker Amendment are going to prevent you from spending more money in education. Mm-hmm. You know, you can have as many local tax caps as you want, but you can't get out of your responsibility to the schools.
Well, I thought it was interesting what Montgomery County's argument was to get the waiver, which one of their arguments was, hey, we can't raise taxes here anymore. We have our income tax is at the highest allowed by the state, 3.2%. We have the Ficker Amendment. We need 9 votes in the county council to bring in more property taxes that are usually allowed. You know, help us out here. If we could raise taxes, isn't what the county's saying? If we could raise taxes more, we would do it, state, but help us. We can't raise taxes anymore. Isn't that what the county was saying, Adam?
Pretty much, and they were also saying our economy is in terrible shape. And the state really didn't buy that argument. I think they should have lent that one more credence. But the state was saying, hey, if you got a local tax cap like the Ficker Amendment, that's your problem. It's not our problem.
So at the end of the blog entry, so now you wrote, so now Montgomery County is obligated to divert $79 million of county money from non-school programs to the schools to maintain its per pupil education spending. And then you ended it with, and this is just the beginning. What did you mean by that?
We're going to have another deficit next year. We don't know how big it's going to be. The latest number was $370 million. The federal aid is going to run out. There are going to be more and more tough choices. And even though next year's deficit may be smaller in absolute numbers than this one's, you know, they're getting all the easy stuff and maybe not so easy stuff out of the way, and the only things that are left are the not easy stuff at all, like layoffs, furloughs, etc.
Okay, we're going to go to our break and pick up with some more of your blog entries. Adam Pagnucco, blogger for Maryland Politics Watch. We'll be right back after the break. We're back with blogger Adam Pagnucco from the Maryland Politics Watch blog. And Adam, we were talking about the fact that the county asked the state for a waiver with respect to funding for schools. They wanted to fund the schools basically less. That's basically what it was, $79 million. But it's remarkable that the county was only one of 3 of 27 counties in Maryland to ask for this waiver. Things are changing in the county. This county is no longer flush with cash. Now you have basically a structural deficit now. The nature of the county is changing. Some affluent people are moving out. You have a greater immigrant population moving in with greater needs. Isn't that where we're at now in the county?
Yeah, we did a series about this last fall called MoCo, Not As Rich As You Think. In terms of nominal incomes, we're actually less than Howard County right now. And our costs are a whole lot higher because we're right next to the nation's capital. We got, you know, our housing is more costly. Even our gasoline is more costly, and we need the money that we make in order to pay for those things. The problem, though, is that the state's wealth formulas are driven in part by property value. So we have these high property values. Guess what? We're getting killed by the high mortgage costs for those properties. But the state says, okay, you're rich, you get less state aid. So we got higher costs. We're third from the bottom in state aid on a per capita basis, and we're getting squeezed.
So isn't this, you mentioned that, for fiscal year 2010, the county's taken the low-hanging fruit. They basically took money out of a rainy day fund. They reduced the amounts that they pay into the healthcare costs for retirees. Now the hard decisions are going to have to be made in the county budget. You're probably going to have the county's probably going to have a deficit next year. It's probably structural. And isn't it always going to come down to now, since income taxes can't be raised in the county, we're at the maximum level allowed by state, it's always going to come down to, like it almost did this year, going over the property tax cap, which now they need a 9-0 vote at the county council. It used to be 7-2, or you're going to have to cut the wages and anger the many unions in the county. Isn't that basically what the fight is going to be now?
Pretty much. And here's what you got to look at. 5 of the 6 public employee union contracts are going to expire in 2010. The negotiations are going to start on them in the fall. So the school system has to negotiate with the teachers, the service employees, and the principals. Like Leggett has to negotiate with McGeo and the police union. What are those new contracts going to look like? Are they going to have any increases? What's going to happen if they have increases and they go over to council? Is there going to be a big fight over cutting those increases? How does that play into the elections? I mean, all of those things are going to come in at the same time with the budget deficit in an election year.
Is this going to resonate with the voters? I mean, when this is this issue going to be clear to the voters? Hey, are my county council members going to raise property taxes, or are they going to go along with the unions for bigger raises?
Well, we found out what the voters thought about taxes in November 2008 when they passed the Ficker Amendment. And it's incumbent, I think, on labor and its supporters to make a case that good government is worth paying for. And they better do it in an election year. That's when you do it.
And you did a blog special on how the state budget cuts hit Montgomery County, and really it's very interrelated between the state and the county. The stimulus money helped out at the state level, thus it helped out at the county level. Without that stimulus money, the state and the county would be in very bad shape. But at the end of that blog entry, you said, on the bright side, Senator President Mike Miller's push to send teacher pensions down to the counties did not succeed, but there's always next year. And you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, these teacher pensions. The state pays them, although the county negotiates the salaries. And there's some people down in Annapolis who want to push those pensions back to the county and let the county pay for them, since they're negotiating the salaries. So you call Senate President Mike Miller Big Daddy. That's his nickname on your blog. But really, that could happen, and maybe not next year because the stimulus money is still at the state level. But maybe after that.
We know Mike Miller is interested in this. He introduced a bill in this prior session to pass down a component of them. There was a fiscal note done in that bill. We know he wants to push it. And look, unfunded mandates are typically passed from the top down. And in Mike Miller's view, this is an unfunded mandate passed from the counties back up to the state. And, I guess you can't blame them for wanting to spend state money on state things that generate credit for state politicians and not for county politicians. So this issue isn't going to go away, especially after the federal money dries up.
But without the federal stimulus money this year, what was the likelihood that those teachers' pensions would have been pushed back to the county?
Miller would have had a stronger case to do it. Before it was clear.
It's not just Mike Miller.
Right, yeah. There are others that feel that way. And there are,
Mike Miller's the Senate president, state Senate president down there.
Yeah, and there are others that feel that way. But before it was clear that the federal aid would be as big as it was, O'Malley proposed a budget that assumed he'd get only about $300 to $400 million in state aid. And even then, O'Malley said, we don't need to pass down these pensions. So it would have been a fight. When the federal aid dries up, if the economy is still as bad as it is now, there will be a very big fight about it.
2010 is just around the corner. You have the 2010 elections, the county council elections. You got the governor's race, the other some other statewide races. One that you seem to continually follow is the comptroller's race. You had a clip on there, a video clip from Jim Smith, who's the county executive for Baltimore County, at one of his fundraisers. Has a lot of money in the bank, and you're saying, hey, is he going to run for comptroller? And you had a video clip from his fundraiser he was talking about moving the state forward and fiscal responsibility at the state level. What's your take on that comptroller's race?
If you're going to run, run. I mean, we know he's traveling around the state. He met with committee from
It's early. It's early. It's
Francho started out early. I mean, we knew back in 05, maybe even late 04, that he was targeting Schaefer because he was doing events against Schaefer. When Schaefer made that comment about people in McDonald's not speaking English, Francho put together a press conference of people criticizing him for it. So we knew what he was doing.
Peter Francho, the current comptroller, is he vulnerable?
Sure, absolutely, because you have a candidate with a whole lot more money. Francho has not done any favors for himself in his relationships with O'Malley and Mike Miller. Jim Smith's chief of staff is O'Malley's brother. We know that Smith is coming down here into Francho's home territory. Yeah, it's time to run.
Mm-hmm. Other interesting races in 2010, what do you see out there at the with the county level? Are the unions going to go after some of the sitting county council who took them on a little bit, or what's going to happen? Is there going to be some interesting races?
Absolutely. I'm looking at county council at large, where they supported Dutchy Trachtenberg back in 2006. Councilmember Trachtenberg has not been with them on their wage increases back in 08 and a number of other votes. They're not real happy about that. We're also looking at Senate in District 17, where you're going to have a challenge by former delegate Cheryl Kagan to Jenny Forehand. District 19 will have an open delegate seat. So there's going to be plenty to cover, plenty to look at.
Why is former delegate Kagan, why would she take on sitting state senator Forehand, both on the Democratic side?
They agree on a lot of issues.
Yeah, so why would she take her on? It doesn't. Why? It doesn't make sense, does it?
Well, Cheryl Kagan has been subtle about her message of why we should get rid of Forehand.
Well, she wants to be a state senator, right?
That's
Isn't that
true.
what the reason is?
I guess coming from her side, it would be, hey, we need somebody in there who's younger, who's more energetic, who's going to push our agenda more. And Forehand's people would reply, well, you now have an incumbent senator who's got very good relationships in Annapolis. Why change? So I think that Cheryl Kagan needs to make the case first that we need to get rid of Jenny Forehand before we consider who our next senator is going to be. She's got some time, but she's off to a fast start.
You sometimes write about the purple line debate, but in the abstract, it's kind of interesting because arguing about the different routes, about this, these other things in the purple line. But I think the cost is approaching $1.7 billion. The state and the county are going to have to pony up half of that. Isn't this entire debate in a way moot because there's no money to build the purple line anyway? So why doesn't the county and the state set aside the money, or the county's going to have to come up with a good bit? Why doesn't the county set aside $200 or $300 or $400 million and then let's have the debate?
This is a small part of a much larger debate, which is how are we going to pay for transportation? I mean, we've got these tremendously congested roads. We've got this need for these transit projects. O'Malley recommended indexing the gas tax back in 07. The legislature did not go along with it. And even very modest bills about transportation, such as Rob Garagiola's proposal to form a task force, to figure out what we need and how much money we need and how we're going to structure it. Even modest bills like that are failing in the General Assembly. And, you got to give credit to the business community. This is their number one issue. They push it, push it, push it. Lots of ordinary people care about it. It's not going anywhere in Annapolis. And we've talked about it over and over and over. We looked at Oregon, where you had an incumbent governor out there who marketed an increase in transportation spending as a stimulus program in a bad economy. And they, Democrats won an election running on that platform, and they're moving forward. Why can't we?
But Adam, at the county level for the purple line, the county's going to have to come up with $200 to $400 million probably. Why aren't they trying to raise that money instead of aren't voters being led on here about this debate without understanding the underlying issues?
I think that it's easy for politicians to commit to the purple line in the abstract. What I would want to ask them is, great, how are you going to pay for it? They're not so eager to talk about paying for this stuff by raising taxes in an election year.
Adam, who has kind of impacted you in your life? I mean, you love getting under these issues and kind of pointing out the hypocrisy and things like that, but you have political figures or people in your life who kind of made a big impact that made you who you are today?
My father, because he, honesty, standing by your word, being trustworthy and reliable, those were values that he had, went back to his father and generations before them. I don't think that just because you get into politics, you get to waive that stuff. As a matter of fact, it's even more important that if you're going to have power over people, that you do keep your word.
And let's face it, your blogging days are numbered, or they're going to be curtailed. Adam, you and your wife are having a baby here in early June, and your wife, Holly Olson's written on the blog that, don't expect Adam to be putting out blog entries every day. He's going to be changing diapers and carrying his load. So let's face it, is this the end of Maryland Politics Watch?
Absolutely not. There may not be 3 or 4 posts on there every day, but look, I need guest bloggers. I'd like to have guest bloggers. I'd like to have you be a guest blogger. Come on, help me out.
So are you going to still keep blogging after the baby? I think it's in early June.
Yeah, but it won't be 3 or 4 posts a day. That's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned your dad. Is he still alive? And
oh yeah, absolutely.
What did he do? What was his job? And
he worked his way up through the school system. He started as a special ed teacher and then became a principal and an assistant superintendent and a schools controller.
Thanks for joining us, Adam Pagnucco, Maryland Politics Watch. Appreciate it. Keep up the good work, and we'll keep following your blog here at the show. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Remember, if it's Tuesday at 9:30 or Thursday at 9, it's Political Pulse on Channel 16 TV. I'm Charles Duffy. We'll see you next week.
Can you pass the salt, Dad? Salt is to